Ezekiel 22:23 through 31. And the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, say unto her, Thou art the land that is not cleansed, nor rained upon in the day of indignation. There is a conspiracy of her prophets in the midst thereof, like a roaring lion ravening the prey. They have devoured souls, they have taken the treasure and precious things, they have made her many widows in the midst thereof. Her priests have violated my law, and have profaned my holy things. They have put no difference between the holy and profane, neither have they showed difference between the unclean and clean, and have hid their eyes from my Sabbaths, and I am profaned among them. Her princes in the midst thereof are like wolves ravening the prey, to shed blood and to destroy souls, to get dishonest gain. And her prophets have daubed them with untempered mortar, seeing vanity and divining lies unto them, saying, Thus saith the Lord God, when the Lord hath not spoken. The people of the land have used oppression and exercised robbery, and have vexed the poor and needy. Yea, they have oppressed the stranger wrongfully. And I sought for a man among them that should make up the hedge, and stand in the gap before the land, that I destroy it not. But I found none. Therefore have I poured out mine indignation upon them. I have consumed them with the fire of my wrath. Their own way have I recompensed upon their own head, saith the Lord God. I'm Michael Bradford, and welcome to the GapFillers podcast. So, welcome to the first GapFillers podcast. My name is Michael Bradford, and let me just start off by saying I hope by starting off with that verse in that passage doesn't come off as pompous, or naming this podcast the GapFillers podcast comes off as prideful. I have no illusions that I'm some perfect individual, or even the right individual. However, I love that verse. It has always it's been something that I've been pondering over for the past year, I think, and I always thought that this would be a great name for a podcast, for a group of people who are tired of having the culture be so corrupt and hollow. And so, there's three people that are covered in that verse: the princes, the priests, and the prophets. Prophets could be something like the press in today's world. The princes would be the politicians, and the priests would be the pastors. And all of them have, for the most part in today's society, gone off the rails in some form or fashion. Now, there are good ones and doing what the Lord has them to do. However, I'm sure they often feel like Elijah did back in the days of Ahab, and basically feeling like they were alone in doing this. And this is kind of to put my voice out there, if nothing else, to the void, to talk about and to get my thoughts in order, because I tend to go all over the place when I'm talking. So I hope this is focused. I plan on covering cultural, historical events, current events, politics, primarily. Hopefully I fill in a lot of Florida gaps. I find it difficult to find information, deep, thoughtful, laid out debates even on local events that are happening in Central Florida, but in general. Unless you're a massive city, you get overlooked by the national news all the time, and that's what most people follow. Even on local news outlets, it ends up being like a 5-10 minute blurb on something really small. Nothing really gets debated or talked about for that matter. So I want to eventually have guests on here, and I think that would be very interesting to have to talk about local politicians, to highlight, because the people who influence your community the most are not the politicians in Washington D.C. They affect the macro, but everyday people from all the way from families. The smallest is individual family. Then you can go up to like the church or the HOA, and then you got city, state, city, county, state, and all those in between. Whereas if you fill out your ballot, you got 3 people that are going to Washington D.C., 4 people maybe, and then the rest are people that you have no clue who they are, why they're there, and that's not really what that local politics was ever supposed to be. Local politics, you should be able to know that person the best, but the way politics has just worked out is, frankly, you don't I don't know that many people who can name your local rep, state rep, or your county commissioner, or your anybody, even in a judgeship for that matter. So I know judgeships are a little hard to talk about because they can't really interview that well because they're restricted. But those are things that I kind of want to cover, economics, stuff like that. I know this is a little broad, so I plan on sticking closely to certain topics, and this podcast will probably be segmented, so there'll be throughout the week. I'll plan on doing one a week and compiling it on a Saturday. And so if news changes between recordings, that'll be something to keep in mind. Situations change. So I probably won't cover a lot of late breaking news, and because my goal is to not cover the big topics right away. It's to take the big picture and to affect change over time. I want to change the culture and change the keep politicians accountable for whatever they do. So this first thing I want to talk about is these 2 Democrats in the state house of Florida switching parties into the Republican Party. And well, the Republican Party has been growing. This has been an issue that actually happens when a party gets too big. Is it waters down the policy and people start dividing over different policies. I mean, the Republican Party has been this way for pretty much ever since I've been alive. And so you got these, you got neocons, you got libertarian-esque, you got people who are, support a million different issues and in a million different ways. Democrats don't have this issue in a way of they have all their members whipped into shape, and they're constantly changing values and party lines, in policy lines, but they're constantly shifting to the left and going nuts, shifting further and further. But this has actually happened in the past in American politics, and it's pretty much what broke the Whigs apart. Is the Whigs divided over slavery, and I can see this happening with the Republican Party over something like abortion. But it's uniting. What's uniting and holding the party together right now is the fact that the Democrats have gone nuts. But that could actually help them in the long run, the Democrats, because it forces people out, and if you can divide the other party and have them fighting, you can get them into you can get more of your guys in. Now, I will say this: I despise the people who call the politicians, the few politicians, especially in Congress, that have a backbone. They instantly call those guys rhinos, and the people who are wishy-washy, those are good guys. It's always the neocon group, the people who want to have endless wars, or they've never found a war they didn't support, and like the John Boltons and and what's his face from the National Review, Bill Kristol. So there's always been those kinds of people in the Republican Party, but the main group is so wishy-washy, and we don't have the Republicans have never had a united viewpoint. Trump has been the closest to bringing that under a unified party of sorts. However, you end up having the Congress people, the people who actually can pass the laws, they always end up fighting and getting nothing done. Or when they get something done, like the tax law that was passed under the first Trump administration. That was a very watered down, that's what we can get through Republicans, And the Republican, they had the House and the Senate, and that was the best they could do. So and raise the deficit and still, because if you lower taxes and you don't cut spending, you raise taxes for future growth. I think it was it wasn't Thomas Sowell. It was his mentor. I forget, his name is escaping me right now. Said that all government spending is a tax, because you're always going to have to pay it back, or else you're going to pay more on it. And that's basically what we do now. Every time we spend $1 trillion more, we spend another $3 billion in interest. So at current rates, the deficit is increasing $3 trillion a year, something like that. It's absurd. I think the deficit it averages out to like 1.5 trillion now or something like that. But either way, we're up to $30+ trillion, and it's a stupid amount. It's an absolute dumb thing that you can do. It's the debt limit raising is an idiotic thing. There's no point in having a debt limit at this point. It's all used as a political football to actually raise spending. So we always the Congress always raises spending and raises the debt limit and raises spending with it. So it never actually does what it was meant to do, which is actually, hey, Congress, stop spending more than you're receiving. Now the Democrats always want to raise taxes and think that's the only way to increase government revenue. And I like the libertarian approach of finding alternative sources of revenue, which we can get into at a later date. But I want new ideas. Taxation is theft, pure and simple. And if you're mismanaging it, it's the most egregious form of theft. The government democracy has always been described as a sheep and a wolf deciding what's for dinner kind of thing. And when you're not held accountable, it just gets that lamb gets chewed up even more. So and back to the two-party thing. There's not really much to be gained by having more congressmen that aren't actually going to hold the line. It's political parties, unless you're going to change, unless they're going to be voted in or out or change policies, they're not really going to do anything. You're just going to have actually more division. So my point though is not that division is bad. If somebody's holding the line, I want them to hold the line for a principled position, not just go along to get along. Unity for unity's sake is bad. Diversity for diversity's sake is bad. There are points where you need it, and there's points where you don't. And if you're doing something bad, I want you to be the person. I want a politician, especially, to be the person that goes against the grain, to stand up to the crowd, not to be bullied into submission. But if you're also going to be the kind of person that's just going on to get along, or divisive just to be divisive, there's no point in that either. Some of the most liberal Republicans in Congress are kind of like that. You got a couple from New Hampshire, a senator from, I think it's New Hampshire, and their governor is also kind of whacked out too, because they're Republican in name only. However, the Republican body always shifts towards them when they need votes, and not towards the people who are principled, like Thomas Massey. He got in trouble this week for not voting for Mike Johnson and falling in line. But Mike Johnson's just going to be the same old speaker that we were used to from all the other Republicans. Trump thinks he can whip him into shape. Well, that remains to be seen, because I'd rather have somebody that that's not bullied and what they stand for, as opposed to somebody who just is, this person. So I'd rather see like a Vivek or somebody as a speaker. Or I love Massey, Jim Jordan, and I'd take there's a few people that I'd take in for speaker beside Mike Johnson. Anybody in the leadership, for that matter, of the Republican Party are always just they're weenies. They never have this really great platform. They're always kind of like this, the slight adjustments at the edges for some reason. So they're never the person that wants to overhaul and crush the bureaucracy. They're always the ones that kind of want to hold on to their seat for as long as they can, like Nancy Pelosi on the Democrat side. I mean, so yeah. Anyways, the next thing I want to talk about is this new virus spreading around. They got two viruses. One is the norovirus, and the other one's a variant of flu. And they're already suggesting that masking might be coming back. Well, I hope that most people that would be listening to this podcast would be principled enough to draw their own conclusions on stuff like that. Look, there's people that I still see driving around with a mask. They're in their own car, they're masked up, and it's like a paranoia. And the problem with, if somebody's paranoid and they want to do their own thing, fine. However, in today's society, what that often means is somebody wants everybody else to be just as paranoid about something as they are, especially when it comes to a disease of some kind, like some germaphobes are that way. No, you can't touch my pen because there's germs, or something like that. And but the thing is that when people use the power of government, especially, they tend to be very blunt and throw it around, and they infringe on other people's liberty, and that's what ticks me off to no end. During COVID is, look, 2 weeks to flatten the curve was okay, fine. If this ended up being this massive, killing off, Black Plague, killing off 30% of the population, I would fully understand. But the thing is that you wouldn't have to force people to do it. People would voluntarily do it. However, if once you see that it was no more than the average flu, or maybe a bad flu, it was all right. Come on, and then the masking wasn't stopped. Everybody was going to catch it. It took me 3 years to catch it. Of course, I was getting blasted by the sun during that time, anyways. During the main things, I never missed a day of work because I worked outside by myself, and I remember that kind of hysteria going around. I enjoyed the no traffic thing for sure. However, the using government especially to throw its weight around and then influence businesses to throw their weight around, you couldn't go into a grocery store. But the thing is that without a mask, the problem is that they would also squeeze everybody down into one entryway. So if somebody was sick in that group, they were twice as likely to come in contact with somebody because there was only one. They went down from 2 doors to 1 door. So none of their things made sense. It was all just mass hysteria. And I again, like I said, you could have a mass, a massive, epidemic, and people will police themselves. However, now that you've done that with COVID, with such a mild thing, people are less likely to police themselves. There's something that's going to be a common thing, a common phrase throughout this. Freedom demands responsibility. If if you take responsibility away, if you take freedom away from me, you're taking responsibility away from me. If you take responsibility away from me, you're taking freedom away from me. That it's just they're two sides of the same coin. And during COVID, they said you can't decide for yourself on whether this is a bad thing or not. You must stay at home, and therefore people became less responsible. For after that, after the COVID had died down, people were more likely to say screw that because of a bad or a small cough. Some people were, it divided the country kind of thing where, the people who were already responsible either became, very, paranoid about anybody with a cough, or they said screw that because, the government's trying to tell me to do this. So they cause their own problems like they often do. Government tends to have that effect where if they declare a war on something, they make it worse. Poverty, drugs, terrorism, they always tend to make it worse because the government, they're great at violence, but all it does is give them power and makes some people feel good, and it pushes, it quashes the rest of society because they take responsibility away. If you had no speed limit on a road, you would have some people going 50, some people going 35, but that's why we have speed limits. But at the same time, people aren't going 100 miles an hour down a mountain road, because consequences are obvious. So, if you're forcing I see this often where you see somebody speeding around people because they're going below the speed limit. Well, you're causing two things to happen with a speed limit that's not obvious for this, for that road. Is you're causing some people to panic and some people to get pissed off, and you end up having both happen. So you end up, the slow people drive slower and the fast people drive faster, and wrecks happen when people are going two different speeds like that, and panicking and I was first person on to respond. I didn't respond to it, but there was a motorcycle accident that happened, and just the other day, and I was the first person to administer aid. But there's not much you can do until they get to a hospital, keep them out of shock or whatever. Anyways, this guy was weaving in and out of traffic on a bike. And it's just one of those things that happen when it happens. You're kind of like, really, dude, you were driving too aggressive. It's when you're by yourself, that's one thing. But when you're on a road weaving in and out of traffic, come on, but it's just dumb. When you're in a society, it takes more responsibility. If you're out in the middle of rural nowhere, you can be irresponsible and take life matters into your own hands for the most part. However, in a society, you have to constantly be thinking about other people. Because me personally, I don't like being told what to do. That's just plain and simple. You tell me what to do, and it makes me not want to do something. It's just but especially if I know what to do already. But if you're the kind of guy, if you're in a society, you have to be aware of other people, because you might think something is okay, and then you just go down just a little bit down the road, and then you're in an accident because somebody else didn't see you. So. And that could have been somebody else, on the side of the road injured. I didn't see the accident itself, so I can't tell you what happened. But I can tell you that, one person driving correctly could have fixed that, and the evidence I saw, So, but anyways, yeah. I think that this will be the end of my first podcast. I thank you all for joining me. If no one ever listened to this, help me get my thoughts onto record. Just so I could actually think out a process and hopefully come up with a reasonable argument, because I will probably I'll encounter people day to day. I love talking to people who kind of disagree with me, and then we can have a good faith argument. But I also want to change. Not I don't. That sounds kind of pompous. Is change society, but I want to influence society. And if more people change, if more people take responsibility for their own lives, abandon hedonism, and turn towards God, I think we can be a much better society. And I think that's it. So I thank you all for joining me, and have a good night and a good week. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the GapFillers podcast. If you'd like to follow me on X, it's GapFillers 1776.